A man in his 70s has died after being pulled from a house fire in Etobicoke late last night. Neighbors left shaken this morning. Good afternoon. Tragedy in an Etobicoke neighborhood where a deadly fire broke out.
The Ontario Fire Marshal is now launching an investigation into what caused the fire. CTV's Mike Walker is live at the scene with more. Mike?
Well, Pauline, Nathan, there is no visible damage to the front of the home. Officials say the fire was contained to a rear bedroom. That's where the senior was found, and investigators are now searching for a cause. This deadly fire broke out around 11:15 last night at the home on Willowridge Road. That's in the Eglinton West and Martin Grove area. Toronto Fire says its crews responded within minutes and were able to get the fire quickly under control. They pulled out a man in his 70s without vital signs. The senior was rushed to hospital where he died this morning. Now, neighbors tell us the man and his adult son lived in the home. The son, they say, managed to escape. The Office of the Fire Marshal is now investigating the cause. Here's more from fire officials and a neighbor I just spoke with who called 911 when he says the son came banging on his door for help.
The fire was contained to the bedroom itself. With the combustibles like mattresses and those types of things, it burns hot and there's a lot of smoke. The report was from, I believe, the son that was on scene. There was some mobility issues. One person was able to get out of the building okay, but the person who succumbed was unable to get out on their own.
They come out and the neighbor came. He wasn't wearing any clothes, but a blanket around him to keep warm, so he must have just ran out. And he asked me to call 911 for the fire. And he was telling me that his father's up in the bedroom. The smoke was unbelievable, so nobody could breathe. There's no way I could go in there and help him.
Now, at this point, neighbors tell us that the senior had suffered from medical conditions and they hadn't seen him for about the past 6 months. It's unclear if this home had working smoke alarms. Investigators are expected to be on scene here all day. Reporting live, I'm Mike Walker. Pauline, back to you.
Thank you, Mike. Brampton city workers are back at the picket lines for a second day of the strike.
The labor dispute disrupting some local services with no end in sight. CTV Sean Leathong is live in Brampton with the latest. Sean.
Well, Nathan and Pauline, I'm standing on Clark Boulevard just outside of a bus terminal. Now, over my left shoulder are members of the Amalgamated Transit Workers Union 1573. They are not on strike, but they're being blocked right now from going into work by CUPE 831. Now, 831 has been on strike, the municipal workers. There's more than 1,200 who've been on strike since yesterday. We reported on this where we understand that CUPE Local 831 had been asking for approximately somewhere in the area of a 4.5 to 6% possible raise on their contract as their 5-year contract was up in March. Now, Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown had said that the offer on the table, what they thought was fair, was a 3% raise. He pointed to Mississauga's CUPE Local and the municipal workers there that signed the contract. They offered the exact same contract. Now, where the workers are today, bus drivers are not on strike, but because CUPE is blocking this entrance, the bus drivers themselves don't want to cross the picket line. They want to stay safe, and in some ways they do want to support other unions. Now, I spoke to the local 1573 ATU president and the national president. Here's what they had to say.
Right now, transit in the city of Brampton is at a complete halt. That's because CUPE is demonstrating their right to strike. Their negotiations broke down just the other day, and as a result, they went for strike action. We represent ATU, Local 1573. That's all the transit operators, mechanics, GSPs, and so on. We were indirectly affected.
We stand with the striking workers at CUPE. I mean, this is the ultimate act of solidarity. And, you can only get to a good collective agreement when you can take the actions that are appropriate in strike protocols, in contract negotiations. And quite frankly, the right to strike is a constitutional right. And CUPE members are exercising that, and we support their initiatives.
So as we heard there, public transit in Brampton right now is at a standstill. Now, last night, Mayor Patrick Brown had said the two sides are far apart in these negotiations, so no telling how long it'll last. Reporting live, I'm Sean Leathong. Nathan, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Sean. Still to come, the new Trump administration is beginning to take shape. The president-elect naming Susie Wiles as his chief of staff, the first woman to hold that role. We'll have the details a little later in the newscast.
As we prepare to honor our fallen heroes on Remembrance Day, a touching tribute has returned to a downtown office building. For the 10th consecutive year, more than 12,000 Canadian flags have been placed on the front lawn of the Manulife Centre at 200 Bloor Street East. It's meant to pay tribute to members of the Canadian Armed Forces ahead of Remembrance Day on Monday. Each flag represents 10 military personnel who lost their lives in wartime or peacekeeping missions.
We have more news in a moment, but first, here's a live look at the city this afternoon. A cloudy start to the day. We're getting into a stretch of more seasonal weather, so definitely time to put on those jackets. There's also rain in the forecast. Jessica Smith is here with a look at the current conditions. Jess.
It feels like after such a warm start to the week, we're getting a dose of proper fall weather in these last few days as we make our way in towards the weekend. A little cloud cover to start and a breezy west-northwesterly wind becoming northwesterly later on, but strong nonetheless. A few peaks of sunshine will make their way out throughout the day, so not a completely overcast day by any means, but those wind gusts right now just under 60 kilometers an hour. So if you have any leaves left out on the lawn, they're probably everywhere right now. Temperature-wise, we're kind of around 10 degrees, a little cooler in some areas towards Lenzing, Godrich, and out through Bancroft. Now, throughout the afternoon, we are going to warm up just a little. Right now, through the islands, we're at 12, through Pearson, 11. We climb up to about 14, but it will feel cooler because of all of that wind. So a layer or two, probably a good idea. Coming up, I'll have a full look at your long-range forecast, including your weekend. But right now, I'll send things back over to Pauline.
Thanks very much, Jessica. Police are identifying a man killed in a stabbing in Scarborough yesterday. Police say 43-year-old Jason Hines was found stabbed in a unit in a Toronto community housing building near Lawrence and Kingston Road yesterday morning. He was pronounced dead on the scene. Police have charged 55-year-old Michael Curry with second-degree murder. And one person has been rushed to hospital after a stabbing at a park near Church and Wellesley. The CTV News chopper was over the scene at Barbara Hall Park, where police say an argument between two people led to the stabbing. The victim is expected to survive.
A teenage girl who was hospitalized after being struck by a vehicle in Ajax yesterday has died. The collision happened on Roslyn Road west of Westney. Durham police say the 13-year-old was hit by an SUV while crossing at a marked crosswalk shortly after 7:30 a.m. She was pinned under the vehicle and had to be extricated before being airlifted to hospital. Police are asking any witnesses or anyone with dash cam footage to contact them.
A man is dead after being shot by police in Orillia. OPP responded to a call for a disturbance at a residence on Barrie Road just before 2 p.m. yesterday. Police located one of the individuals involved on nearby Cochrane Street. During the interaction that ensued, an officer was stabbed with an edged weapon and sustained serious injuries. Investigators say the officer then shot the individual, who later died. The officer remains in hospital in stable condition. The province's police watchdog is now investigating.
An officer was stabbed, and there was a discharge of firearm multiple times. As I said, that individual was taken by ambulance to hospital where he was pronounced deceased. There was another officer, I understand, that discharged a conducted energy weapon.
5 investigators and 3 forensic officials have been assigned to the case. Anyone with information is asked to contact the SIU.
Another person has been arrested and 2 others are being sought in relation to demonstrations this week outside of Brampton Hindu Temple. Peel Police responded to a large demonstration near the Hindu Sabha Mandir on the Gore Road Monday evening. Protesters were told to leave the area immediately or face arrest. 57-year-old Narendra Lal Banerjee has been arrested and charged with public incitement of hatred. Arrest warrants have been issued for 24-year-old Aram Galor and 22-year-old who's been identified just as Arpit on several charges, including uttering threats to cause death or bodily harm and conspiracy to commit assault with a weapon. Police say they formed an investigative team looking into all incidents from the protests Sunday and Monday.
Another beluga has died at Marineland, making it the 5th whale to die there in a year and the 17th since late 2019. The province is speaking publicly about its ongoing investigation of the park, saying water troubles are under control after a recent investment. Ontario's chief animal welfare inspector said to her understanding marine mammal deaths at the Niagara Falls Park have not been related to water quality. Marineland has previously said that the animal deaths are part of the cycle of life and defended its treatment of the animals.
All three levels of government are celebrating what they say is a major milestone in redeveloping the Portlands along Toronto's waterfront. Mayor Olivia Chow and other dignitaries arrived by boat to announce the Don River is finally being reconnected to Lake Ontario with the completion of a new mouth for the river at the waterfront. Officials say this has been decades in the making, and it means the Portlands will be transformed and much more accessible to the community.
It's a rebirth, really is a rebirth. And in this rebirth, 10 minutes away, 10 minutes walk from downtown, Torontonians next summer would be able to enjoy 50 acres of park. Wow, where you can have picnics, where kids can play.
The redirection of the Don River has also led to the creation of a new island along the waterfront. The multi-billion-dollar effort was carried out to increase flood protection in the Portlands.
Provincial politicians are defending a plan that will continue to see your vote and your taxpayer dollars pay for party finances.
It's called the per-vote subsidy, and leaders are extending it for another 2 years. CTV's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Siobhan Morris explains.
When you slip your vote into the ballot box, you aren't just choosing a candidate. Each vote means cash for Ontario political parties.
It costs the taxpayer about $12 million a year, and overall the program has cost taxpayers about $100 million.
All parties at Queen's Park have backed extending the vote subsidy plan for 2 years. It was due to expire at the end of December.
This was a recommendation, I'll remind you, of the independent chief electoral officer to sort of level the playing field. And this came about after the whole cash for access scandal under the previous Liberal government.
Each vote is worth about 64 cents to political parties. 4 times a year, those parties get a payment depending on how many people voted for them. For example, Progressive Conservatives got payments of $1.2 million each quarter this year.
They can buy lawn signs for the next election. They can help pay for attack ads for the next election.
On your dime, a plan that came about after the former Liberal government banned donations from corporations and unions.
This is welcome news for everyone. It ensures that our democracy remains healthy and strong, quite frankly, and it provides certain equitable funding for everyone.
The government hasn't shared a justification for the extension, but opposition leaders see it as good for democracy.
The per-vote subsidy is a way to drive big money out of politics and to create a balance between private fundraising and public funding of political parties.
But the Canadian Taxpayers Federation insists there are other ways.
Federal level, they had a program very similar to this that was scrapped by the Harper government well over a decade ago, and the parties adapted.
They're calling on the Premier to scrap the subsidy, something he promised to do when running for PC leadership, calling it political party welfare.
You know, a cynic might point to the fact that the governing party, the Progressive Conservatives, haven't raised as much money this year as they have in previous years.
All in the run-up to a potential early election call. Siobhan Morris, CTV News.
October was a slower month for Canada's job market. Statistics Canada released figures today showing a modest 15,000 jobs gained across the country in October. Unemployment held steady at 6.5%. Analysts referred to the results as more of the same for the labor market, saying modest employment gains are being diminished by ongoing strong population growth. Many economists see weakness in the job market continuing in the short term before interest rate cuts spark a rebound in economic growth next year.
The Prime Minister's office announced the reactivation of the Cabinet Committee on Canada-U.S. Relations to deal with potential issues, including Trump's promise to conduct mass deportations.
It's a threat that could send thousands of migrants fleeing to Canada. CTV's Judy Trinh has more on how Ottawa and the RCMP are preparing.
The possibility of a massive influx of undocumented migrants from the United States looms. The RCMP has been preparing for months.
We knew that should Mr. Trump be elected to be the next U.S. president, there could be an impact on irregular and illegal migration here in Canada. So we have different scenarios for whatever might happen.
The Mounties plan to increase patrols along the border with more officers and vehicles. Before its closure, Quebec's Roxham Road, the most porous point in the country, saw as many as 500 migrants a day cross over. That number could be surpassed.
We must make sure that the legal and regular entry points are well covered, which should be the case because those people that want to come in Canada know that they should not go through that way.
Migrants will be arrested, then transferred to the Canadian Border Services to determine if they're eligible for asylum. But the union representing border guards says there's a shortage of more than 2,000 workers.
We're not expecting the worst case scenario. We're preparing as any responsible government should in terms of contingencies. But we also think it's important not to scare Canadians.
There are only 3 immigration detention centers in the country. Processing refugee claims right now already takes months, if not years. Immigration lawyers expect the backlog to get worse with Donald Trump's policies.
And we've got to guard Canada and what we have here from the impact of that tsunami of refugee claimants.
For now, the Mounties are on high alert. If there is a surge of migrants, it will take place over the next few weeks before Donald Trump's inauguration in January. Judy Trin, CTV News, Ottawa.
Almost 3 weeks after the vote, judicial recounts in British Columbia's provincial election are expected to wrap up today. If the current results are confirmed, Premier David Eby's New Democrats will hold on to their majority government by exactly 1 seat. Judges have been recounting by hand ballots in both Surrey, Guildford, and Kelowna Centre. The NDP victory in Surrey, Guildford was the closest of the election, with a difference of only 21 votes. A partial recount is taking place in a separate riding where an uncounted ballot box was found containing more than 800 votes.
South of the border, President-elect Donald Trump has begun naming his team as he prepares to return to the White House in January.
Susie likes to stay sort of in the back, let me tell you. The Ice Maiden, we call her the Ice Maiden.
That's Trump early Wednesday morning after securing his victory, thanking his campaign co-chair Susan Wiles. She has now been named his White House chief of staff. Wiles is the first woman to take on the role, with Trump calling her tough, smart, and innovative. Meanwhile, world leaders continue to send in their congratulations on his election win.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has congratulated Donald Trump on his election victory. Putin called Trump a courageous man in his first public comments since Tuesday's presidential vote. Putin said he was ready to talk to Trump about Ukraine. Trump has repeatedly claimed he can end the war in Ukraine in a day, but he's not elaborated on how he'd make that happen.
And in Ukraine today, cleanup efforts continue after a Russian airstrike wounded more than 24 people. Local officials say a 500-kilogram glide bomb struck a high-rise apartment building in Kharkiv. A separate strike on the port city of Odessa left 1 person dead and 9 others injured. The attacks come as Russian forces continue to carry out an intensified aerial campaign against Ukraine.
In Amsterdam, police say at least 5 people are in hospital and dozens arrested after Israeli soccer fans were chased down and attacked after a game last night. Authorities say rioters actually actively sought out Israeli supporters to attack and assault them. It's not clear how the violence began. Video also shows Israeli fans chanting anti-Arab slogans in the streets. At some point during their time in Amsterdam for the match between Dutch and Israeli teams, leaders in the Netherlands and Israel denounced last night's attacks as anti-Semitic.
There are many demonstrations and protests, and we are always prepared for them. And of course, they are related to the situation in the Middle East and the ongoing war in Israel and Palestine. But what happened last night is not a protest. It has nothing to do with protest or demonstration. It was crime.
Israel initially ordered that 2 planes be sent to bring fans home, but later the Prime Minister's office said it would work to help citizens arrange commercial flights. And fire crews in Southern California are battling a dangerously fast-moving wildfire that has forced thousands to flee.
It's like trying to put out a blowtorch with a squirt gun.
The fire, fueled by strong winds, has grown to more than 20,000 acres in just 2 days. destroying homes in several communities. In the east, a wildfire is threatening homes in a New Jersey suburb of Philadelphia. There's been virtually no rain since August, and that has left tinder dry conditions in the area, making the firefighting even more challenging.
Prince William is opening up about what he calls a brutal year after both his wife, Princess Kate, and his father, King Charles, were diagnosed with cancer. Speaking to reporters in South Africa, Prince William described 2024 as being probably the hardest year of his life. The Prince of Wales says he is proud of his wife and his father for handling things the way they have. King Charles was diagnosed with cancer in February, forcing the monarch to step away from public appearances for 2 months. Princess Kate announced her cancer diagnosis a few weeks after. She is now slowly returning to public duties.
New data from the Salvation Army is outlining concerns around inflation and food affordability, and there's increased anxiety when it comes to the housing crisis and crime rates. The research also revealed more than half of those accessing food banks are using them for the first time, and that parents are bearing the brunt, with 58% of parents facing flood-related or food-related challenges, compared to 50% of Canadians overall. And here to break down the research and the findings further for us is Glenn Van Gulik, the Salvation Army Divisional Secretary for Public Relations and Territorial Marketing. Thanks for joining us. What are some of the struggles that go beyond the cost of living?
Well, you're right. I think for many people, especially parents seeing through this report, they're experiencing the broader impacts of the cost of living being so high. The challenges of stretching that dollar from the beginning of the month all the way to the end and making sure that they have what they need, the basic needs for they and their families. And so as we've seen through this report, some of the numbers coming in are quite telling and reflect what the Salvation Army is seeing every day as people come to us for support.
And what are some of the top concerns?
Well, of course, as I said, managing those limited resources, predominantly the financial resources, getting through that entire month. But of course, realizing that housing costs are going up and rent goes up every year, and sometimes those limited resources don't go up at the same rate. Of course, we see from families especially, many of them coming to the Salvation Army or food banks for the very first time. That has increased up to 58%, which is, again, a telling reality, something that we're seeing every day, where families are having to make choices, impossible choices between, do I pay the rent this month, or do I pay a bill, or do I put food on the table, or make sure that my daughter's medication can be covered? It's those challenges that parents are facing and individuals every day that the Salvation Army are trying to meet those needs as best we can.
And what are you hoping to do with all this information from this report?
Well, as with any report where the voice of Canadians are speaking into what they're seeing as concerns and challenges, we want to take that information and explore how best that we can continue to serve and evolve the programs that we offer every day. Of course, food insecurity being a constant and something that's regularly part of the lives of so many, but also acknowledging that some of these impacts around healthcare especially are connected and interconnected with food insecurity, housing insecurity, and the like. So again, making sure that provincial, federal governments are aware of the voices of Canadians, but using that information ourselves to make sure that we can respond and adjust where we need to continue to support individuals every day.
Yeah, hopefully this report makes a difference. Glenn Van Gulik from the Salvation Army, thank you so much for your time. All the best.
A pleasure, Nathan. Have a great day.
You too.
As we round out the work and school week, we remain above seasonal, but that wind is going to make it feel just a little bit cooler out there. So don't let the double digits fool you. You are going to need at least a layer or two. Heading into the afternoon, we'll sit around 14. Seasonally, we should be at 8, but those winds out of the northwest with those gusts upwards of 60 kilometers an hour, oof, it'll make it feel a little cool. And that sunset time now, 4:58 p.m. Coming up, I'll have a full look at your long-range forecast, including what you can expect for your weekend, and we will look ahead to your forecast for the Taylor Swift concert, the first one, next week.
$30,000 Canadian paper flags will soon be placed on the lawns outside Sunnybrook's Veteran Centres. For more than 13 years, Operation Raise a Flag has brought volunteers to lay the flags just in time for Remembrance Day, as a thank you to residents for their service and sacrifice.
CTV's Beth McDonnell now on what the operation means to veterans who call the centre home.
Preparations for Operation Raise a Flag are underway. Come Sunday, 30,000 flags will be planted by volunteers outside Sunnybrook's Veterans Centre before the big reveal on Remembrance Day.
The sight of the flags the morning after they're laid out there is just heartwarming. It's almost we've had a snowstorm. Everything is covered with little flags. This was taken in the harbor in Japan.
96-year-old Richard Radcliffe did 2 tours as a young man in the Navy during the Korean War.
When I say we were out there all the time, when we needed to re-gas up, we had a tanker out there, and we refueled from the tanker underway, and I was steaming along. The rest of the time, you never knew what was coming next. You worked with either with the carrier that kept you out in the middle of the Yellow Sea, or you were working inshore, supporting the Army ashore with gunfire when they needed it.
Part tribute for the nearly 200 veterans who call the centre home, Operation Raise a Flag is also a fundraiser. Corporate and individual donations are helping make upgrades a reality, as was done with the physiotherapy gym, library, games room, and outdoor deck, and make veterans programs possible.
Even though the average age is in the late 90s, we have over 50 veterans who are centenarians living with us. You know, a lot of them, really, it's about quality of life, and that's really what we're here to provide. How can we help them to live their best life?
This one is the Medal for Freedom. That came from the people of Korea.
Ratcliffe's contribution to the peace and freedom gained in Korea means a lot to him.
Everywhere we went, people, officials, citizens said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming to our aid." We knew right away that we did the right thing.
Ratcliffe is grateful for Operation Raise a Flag and the impact it's having on the veterans. He hopes to live past 100. Beth McDonnell, CTV News.
All right, looking at the forecast, and it feels like things are like back to normal. We're getting typical fall weather.
But still nice out, right?
You know what? This morning wasn't terrible. It is getting cooler, and the winds have a lot to do with it. A northwesterly wind, and it is breezy today. It is going to make it feel a little cooler out there. Also, if you have leaves that you haven't completely raked up just yet, they're going to be everywhere by the time you get home. Weather is brought to you by the Presser Law Firm. Injury lawyers, you don't pay unless they win. Now, not a brilliantly sunny day out there, but still quite nice. The chance of maybe a light shower, maybe some drizzle as we get throughout our day. But overall, we are just holding on to a cloudy yet fairly mild end to the work and school week. But that wind, those gusts upwards of 60 kilometers an hour add that bit of a freshness to the air. So a layer is probably a good idea if you plan on spending some time outside. Temperature-wise, it's not too bad. We're at 11 here in the city. We're at 14 through Windsor, 11 in Ottawa, anywhere kind of north of Sudbury for the most part, with the exception of Sault Ste. Marie, relatively cool in those low to mid-single digits. As we head throughout the afternoon, again, we remain above seasonal, but you factor in that wind, and we don't have a wind chill, but it will feel a little bit cool out there. We're looking at temperatures still in the double digits right across southern Ontario, but for the most part, we are cooling down as we head into at least the start of our weekend. Tonight, we will be hovering just a little bit below seasonal for the first time, quite honestly, in a few weeks. So we are going to sit right around 1, maybe 0 as we head into the early morning hours tomorrow. But it's getting to that time of year where it's actually starting to feel a little fresh. We're in those minus single digits as we head through the overnight for a good portion of southern and eastern Ontario. Not much in the way of extreme active weather. That kind of leftover trough, that brings that chance of maybe a scattered shower, mostly drizzle throughout the day. In and around the GTA, we're likely to stay just mostly cloudy. We're watching for another system coming up set to impact us as we head in towards the end of our weekend for our Sunday. The rest of our day today, though, really not too bad, and a little bit of sunshine this afternoon before the sun sets before 5 p.m. As we head in towards our Friday night, relatively clear, and we have a beautiful start to our weekend. Lots of sunshine out there, but we are looking at a single-digit high, so it's a little bit cool across a good portion of southern Ontario, especially the Golden Horseshoe. Cloud cover moves in first. Then we are watching for some showers to make their way through as we head in towards our Sunday kind of late morning, early afternoon, beginning out towards Windsor and London, and then sweeping across as we head through the lunch hour. lunch hour, we get a bit of a break into the early evening. Another round of showers carries us through about 9 to about 10 p.m. Again, temperature-wise, we're still above seasonal for our daytime high today, but it feels cool thanks to all that wind out there, although we are not quite in wind chill territory. We get into our Saturday, though, and we're just looking at 7 for the high, but at least it's a sunny 7. Hopefully that's kind of making up for it a little bit. Showers move in again off and on throughout our day on Sunday, but we warm up just a little. We step into Monday for Remembrance Day, and we are looking at the chance of maybe a light shower, but overall just some cloud cover, a few peaks of sun, and a daytime high on the positive side above seasonal, so nice for a lot of those ceremonies that take place throughout the morning and throughout the day. Looking ahead towards next week, we do cool down a little bit, some single-digit highs, but again, that is just closer to seasonal. Looking ahead to Thursday, we all know what's happening Thursday. If you're a Swiftie, even if you aren't, you probably still know. The first concert is on Thursday. We're looking at showers in the morning, and then it clears out as we head in towards the afternoon and evening. So all in all, a very standard issue fall forecast. Pauline, I'll send it over to you.
Thanks so much, Jess.
Thanks.
There are some changes coming to transit service across the GTA over the next few days. If you're planning to take the subway, it is set to be another weekend of partial closures along Line 2. There will be no service between Kipling and Keele stations because of planned track work. Shuttle buses will operate instead. And there will be no GO train service on most of the Lakeshore East line this weekend. Starting late tonight, replacement buses will operate between Union Station and Pickering GO, skipping all other stops in Toronto's city limits. Trains will still run between Pickering and Oshawa, and the Stouffville line trains will not run to Union Station this weekend. Instead, they'll begin and end at Kennedy GO Station.
Swift healing for patients at a Toronto hospital who are inspired by the superstar that's just ahead.
There is new insight into Canada's chaotic response to the avian flu. The initial outbreak nearly 3 years ago devastated poultry farmers and their flocks and left them and government officials scrambling. In collaboration with the Investigative Journalism Foundation, CTV News uncovered documents shedding some light on the early days of the crisis. CTV's Alison Bamford has the details.
The barns on this Saskatchewan turkey farm looked very different around this time 2 years ago.
It's devastating. It's quite a shock.
Jelmer Wiersma's operation was one of more than 400 Canadian poultry farms infected by the highly contagious avian flu. His entire flock had to be euthanized, nearly 90,000 birds.
It's a sense of relief. At least they're not suffering anymore.
It's been the largest animal health emergency that this country has ever had to face.
Since December 2021, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency has destroyed more than 11 million birds impacted by the virus. Documents obtained through an access to information request by advocacy group Animal Justice show CFIA's resources spread thin trying to respond at the height of the outbreak. The agency spent millions hiring third-party contractors to assist.
We just haven't built in surge capacity at these agencies.
In some cases, those private companies didn't follow the biosecurity measures in place to curb the spread. Other times, the CFIA ran out of carbon dioxide used to euthanize birds and had to consider less preferred methods.
Many of those birds had to be manually killed, which likely means having their necks snapped.
The agency has since secured a steady supply of CO2 and is confident in its outbreak response.
And like anything that you do many times and become more proficient at it, you become more effective.
Back on the farm, it's business as usual for Wiersma, who managed to rebuild his flock.
You do things properly, and then hopefully it doesn't happen again.
Infection rates dropped drastically since the first wave. As of this week, there are only 16 active infections in the country, almost all in BC. The CFIA continues surveillance not only for the poultry industry, but now cattle, after American dairy cows tested positive for the virus earlier this year, something Canadian cows haven't seen yet. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Saskatoon.
New figures suggest COVID-19 may be spreading a little more slowly, but is still having a significant impact in this province. The update from Public Health Ontario looks at the week of October 27th to November 2nd. 14.6% of COVID lab tests came back positive. That's down from prior weeks, but still considered a moderate level of spread. 845 hospital beds were occupied by COVID patients, and 14 died of the virus. This comes as public health officials encourage anyone aged 6 and up to get an updated COVID-19 vaccine, which is now offered alongside the flu shot. Well, it's expected to be the musical event of the year. Taylor Swift is set to take our city by storm next week.
And it's not just concert goers caught up in the mania. One GTA hospital is using the power of Taylor to help their young patients. Taylor Swift may be at the Rogers Centre in a week, but she's a constant presence at Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital all this month. They're calling it Tayvember, and even the staff are joining in the fun, like dressing for Swift's Red era.
A lot of our patients love Taylor Swift. I know my colleagues will poke fun and think it's all for me, but I know truly that the kids love Taylor, and so they enjoy the activities.
Child life specialist Jocelyn Leeworthy has been planning this since last June.
It's also something that I link into so many aspects of my patient care, incorporating her lyrics like taking a deep breath and promoting deep breathing with kids, and we use that whether a child's here for a respiratory illness or coping through a procedure and relaxation.
And even for the kids who may not be so interested in Swift herself, Leeworthy comes up with things like trivia games or scavenger hunts.
We're trying to get them ambulating, say, after a surgery, so getting them up and moving.
Evelyn Wood has been in the hospital a couple of times lately, and her mom says she's been a Swiftie since she was a baby.
My sister sang All Too Well to her as a bedtime song, so she would fall asleep to that.
And they appreciate the effort the hospital has put into Tayvember.
I think as a parent, you're concerned because your child is scared and it's all new and foreign, but to have something that they enjoy and they relate to, and for someone who's such a positive role model, especially for young girls these days.
Taylor Swift is playing 6 shows in Toronto from November 14th to the 23rd, but the Tayvember activities here at the hospital continue till the end of the month. Pauline Chan. And still to come, after closing at a new high yesterday, Canadian stocks slipped today in morning trading. Details and the rest of your business headlines after the break.
Toronto stocks slipped in morning trading, but the Canadian and U.S. markets are trading near record highs.
Andrew Bell of BNN Bloomberg brings us the latest in business.
Hello there, here are your business headlines. Canadian stocks slipped today after closing at a new record high yesterday, but America's S&P 500 powered to a new high on anticipation of tax cuts and deregulation under President-elect Donald Trump. In Toronto, big bank stocks edged downward, but telecom provider TELUS jumped about 4% after the company hiked its dividend. Montreal-based clothing retailer Dynamite, which operates the fast fashion Dynamite and garage chains, plans an initial public offering of shares. Now, the issue will be existing stock, so the company won't get any proceeds. Chief Executive Andrew Lutfi is the sole owner of Dynamite, which had revenue of almost $900 million in its latest year. Finally, a former TD Bank employee in the lender's troubled anti-money laundering department in the U.S. has been charged with stealing customer information. U.S. prosecutors say the 32-year-old, who worked at the bank from 2023 until May of this year, had a phone with images of 255 checks belonging to customers for use in a check fraud. TD last month said it would pay almost $3.1 billion US in fines and other penalties for failing to prevent money laundering in the US. That's the latest in business. I'm Andrew Bell of BNN Bloomberg.
The GTA has some of the most congested roads in North America, and unfortunately, there are crashes every day, many of them serious.
According to the OPP, there were more than 400 traffic fatalities on Ontario highways last year. Your best way to stay safe is to be a careful, defensive driver. CTV's Pat Foran has this consumer alert.
It's something no one ever wants to happen. For Andrea Garnsars, what started as a routine drive changed in the blink of an eye.
The bag to the car blew up on the steering wheel. There was an accident.
A car slammed into hers from behind. Her car was wrecked and she was shaken.
I was just like in a state of shock.
The best way to protect yourself is by driving according to road conditions. Bad weather like fog, rain, snow, or ice can lead to a chain reaction crash.
When visibility is low, it's harder for drivers to see what's ahead. Cars also take longer to stop on wet or icy roads, so it's really important to slow down and leave space between you and other vehicles to help keep you safe.
Pay attention to drivers around you, especially those following too closely. In slippery conditions, ease off the gas to slow down instead of applying the brakes, which can cause skidding. While less common than they used to be, car fires still happen. If your vehicle catches fire, you have to act fast.
Pulling over immediately is crucial if you smell smoke or see flames. Once stopped, shut off the car, get out, and move at least 100 feet away from the vehicle and call 911. Attempting to fight the fire on your own, especially without the appropriate extinguisher, can be a deadly mistake.
Flooding is another issue to be aware of. Even a small puddle can cause you to lose control. Since it's hard to gauge the depth of water, the best advice is to avoid driving through any standing water. Turn around and take a different route. Floodwaters can also ruin your engine and electronics. As for Andrea, she knows she was lucky.
Thankfully, nothing happened to my legs on top of it because of the bash into the front of the bus.
Pat Foran, CTV News.
The latest national report shows asking prices for rent declined on an annual basis for the first time since July 2021. Average rental price for all residential property types in Canada was $2,100 in October, marking a 1.2% annual decrease. Declines were mainly focused in larger cities within Ontario and BC, as well as in Calgary and Montreal. In Toronto, a one-bedroom cost just under $2,400 last month, which was an 8.7% decrease over the same time last year. A two-bedroom rental was pegged at just under $3,100, a nearly 10% decline year over year.
Coming up, a historic artifact from the Titanic has resurfaced and is up for auction. Details when we return. A postcard written by a passenger on the Titanic just days before its ill-fated journey across the Atlantic has resurfaced.
And the news that the historical artifact is up for auction is making waves for Titanic enthusiasts. CTV's Paul Hollingsworth has the details.
Postmarked at 3:45 p.m., April 11th, 1912. This postcard was sent by Richard William Smith, a first-class passenger on the Titanic. His note to Olive Dakin, who lived in England, included the line, "Just leaving for the land of stars and stripes." It was just 3 days before the Titanic hit an iceberg and sank in the North Atlantic.
That's a piece of living history almost.
On the second day of the voyage, the Titanic stopped at Queenstown, Ireland to pick up passengers, and that was when the postcard was likely sent. It will soon be sold to the highest bidder at an auction house in England.
A little thing like an auction all of a sudden brings it back, and you see a person behind the story.
Historian Blair Bede says this is a tangible piece of history that fuels the never-ending public fascination with the Titanic.
Immediately, I think of the post workers on board Titanic who were actually bringing mail up as the ship was sinking.
Richard William Smith was one of the more than 1,500 people who died when the Titanic sank. The postcard has attracted a lot of global attention, especially in Halifax, where the Titanic recovery effort was based and more than 150 victims were buried.
We have a real anchor in the history of Titanic here.
The auction will take place on November 16th. The postcard is expected to fetch roughly £10,000, more than $18,000 Canadian. Paul Hollingsworth, CTV News, Halifax.
All right, it's Friday. Looking at the rest of the day, how are things shaping up?
It is going to be windy, so if you're heading out later on this afternoon, just keep that in mind. It will make it feel a little fresh. We don't have a wind chill just yet, but we are kind of tiptoeing into that territory, but it will be nice. We're holding on to a fairly moderate daytime high, albeit a cooler one. As we step in towards the end of our weekend, we're looking at a very seasonal stretch of days, so it's not cold yet by any means, which is cold in comparison to the 24 degrees we saw earlier this week. We're at 11 here in the city right now. We're holding on in the double digits to round out the work and school week. A little cooler into the day tomorrow, but tons of sunshine out there. And really, as we step into the next few days, we settle into the middle of the month. We're looking at not too bad of a long-range forecast. A little shower activity into our Sunday, lingering into our Monday morning, and the chance of showers on Thursday before everyone gets into their season of Swifty as we kind of step in towards what is going to be a busy couple of days, I'm sure.
All right, thank you, Jess. And that is CTV News at noon. Remember, you can get Toronto's breaking news all day long on CP24 and at ctvnewstoronto.ca.
For Jessica and all of us here, have a very pleasant afternoon. I'm Pauline Chan.
And I'm Nathan Downer. Be sure to join us later for CTV News at 5 and 6. Have a great day.